Hey there Blue Mages, Liam here, and welcome to the Blue Academy Raid Guide for Containment Bay P1T6, or Sophia, Extreme. This fight is a little bit tricky, and does require a bit more thought than the ARR Extremes, but if we know what to expect going into it, then we should have minimal issues. For this fight, I recommend 1 tank mimic, 2 healer mimics, and 5 DPS mimics. However, you can add an extra tank mimic to make things a little bit easier if you need to, as you'll see with my group here. Before I go over a full fight timeline, I'll talk about what each of Sophia's abilities do. In a vacuum, they're all pretty easy to deal with, but they do get combined in certain ways that make it a little bit tricky during the actual fight. Anyway, let's get started. Thunder 2 is a frontal cleave attack. To avoid this, just move behind her or move to her flank. Thunder 3 is a donut style attack, so just move under Sophia and you will be safe. Arrow 3 is a point blank AoE that also knocks back. Move out to avoid this. You do not want to get knocked off the platform. Gnosis is cast by Daughter and is a big AoE knockback. Get right up in her face to avoid getting knocked off, or just use shortcast. Ion Telios spawns 4 clones of Sophia. These will replay her spellcasts, but we'll talk about how that actually works later. Quasar can either target random players and drop meteors dealing proximity-based damage, or drop meteors on the scales on the east and west side of the arena. We'll also talk about how to handle this later. Sintamani is a room-wide AoE attack that hits twice on the very first cast and 3 times on all subsequent casts, though it is possible to skip the first cast. Arms of Wisdom is a tank buster with no cast bar that also applies a lightning resistance down debuff when damage is taken. I point out when damage is taken because if the tank diamondbacks and has a fresh gob skin up, they will take 0 damage and not receive the debuff. If the tank does receive the debuff, then a tank swap is needed. This is where a second tank mimic can be helpful, but a DPS with Mighty Guard can do it just fine. Discordant Damnation targets 4 players with black circles and 4 players with white circles. Match up 1 black with 1 white. Players not stacked appropriately will receive a healing down debuff and a spicy bleed. This is intended to be a role-based mechanic, but since all of us have the role of DPS, it's effectively random. Okay, so that's it for Sophia's abilities. Each one isn't too confusing by itself, as I said, but she will combine them and use them in certain orders that will make things a bit difficult. Let's look at a pull here and I'll talk through what's going on. We pull as normal, and the tank should face her to the north. She will use Thunder 2, so simply stay behind her in order to avoid the hit. Shortly after, we will see our first set of clones spawn. Sophia will cast either Thunder 2 or Thunder 3, so handle that as normal, and she also tethers to some of the clones. Take note of which she tethered to, as these will recast the Thunder spell in just a bit. After Thunder, she casts Arrow and tethers to the other clones. She will then cast Execute, which makes the clones recast her abilities based on which were tethered to them. Resolve the Thunder ability using the Thunder clones the same way you did with Sophia, so move behind for Thunder 2 or underneath for Thunder 3. Supposedly, she will cast a tank buster before the phase transition, but I've never seen this, and our DPS should be way beyond what's needed to skip that. So, we go into the ads phase. During the ads phase, Sophia will apply a debuff that will zombify players when they die, rather than killing them outright. This mostly shouldn't matter, but if someone does get zombified and you see them following you, try to lead them to safe areas as needed. Sophia will spawn 3 ads here, so we will need 1 main tank and 1 off tank. The off tank will pick up the first Demiurge and tank it on the east side of the platform, while the main tank will pick up the other 2 and try to bring them to the southwest corner. The second Demiurge heals the other ads and casts Divine Spark, which is a gaze mechanic that confuses players. Look away to avoid this. This is the first ad that we will kill. The third Demiurge will drop an Ice Puddle and also cast Gnostic Grant, which is a huge frontal cleave that applies a Vuln Up debuff. Face the third Demiurge outwards and only a tank will have to adjust. This ad should die second. The first Demiurge has a directional parry attack similar to Ravana, so be careful about where you're hitting it. It will also cast Infusion, which is meant to be a group stack mechanic, but the targeted player can just cast Diamondback to survive, so we'll do that instead. After the ads are dead, Sophia will hit both scales and tilt the platform. Move to the far east for the first slide, and then don't move for the second slide. Make sure you are positioned such that you will not slide into the Frostbite AoE left behind by the third Demiurge. She will then hit the party with a large AoE attack, so heal up and get ready for the next phase. Sophia will spawn and cast ground targeted Quasar. Bait these towards the center and then move to one side of the platform together. Sophia will also cast Quasar on the scales, but for this Quasar only, there will be no slide, so you don't have to worry about it. She will then cast Thunder 2, and then Quasar on the scales. From here on, the platform will slide during Quasar, so let's talk about the mechanics. Sophia can drop blue meteors, which have a weight of 3, and red meteors, which have a weight of 1. The way we're supposed to figure this out is by seeing which side weighs more, and by how much more it weighs. We always go to the side that weighs less, and if the difference in weight is 2 or more, it's a big slide, and if the difference is only 1, it's a small slide. However, it also turns out that we can just count the number of tethers and see where the blue meteor is. If there is an even number of tethers in total, it will be a big slide, and we want to position at the edge of the platform. If there is an odd number of tethers in total, it will be a small slide, and we will position sort of between the two lines on the floor. We position here because sometimes Daughter will spawn on the opposite side and use a beam attack, which we would like to avoid. Additionally, sometimes Sophia will do a dive bomb type attack called onrush, and we will need to position north or south to avoid that. It sounds pretty complicated, but it's pretty simple. You just start running towards the side that has only red meteors, as it will always be lightest. Then you count the number of tethers and adjust for big or small slide. Then look to see if Sophia is casting onrush and position accordingly. Once you've seen this 3 or 4 times, it should be pretty easy to get a handle on it. After the slide, Sophia will apply Discordant Damnation debuffs followed by 2 Sintamani AoEs. Handle the debuffs and then heal up during the AoE. However, if we do push her below 67% at any point during this, she will actually skip immediately to the next phase, so be aware that you might not even see this phase at all if your DPS is really high during the first phase. Sophia will spawn 4 clones and then do 3 Sintamani AoEs. She follows up with a Thunder 3, and then an Arrow 3, and then Arms of Wisdom. Note which clones she tethers to during Thunder 3, as only one of these will be safe during the execute. Right before execute casts, Daughter will appear on the north or south side lined up with the clones. Whichever clones are here are no longer safe, as Daughter will use a beam attack during execute, so go to whichever clone is safe. Sophia will follow up with 3 Sintamanis, an Arms of Wisdom, and then do another Scale Tilt. The rest of the fight will follow a somewhat complex loop, but we're not really going to talk about it since our DPS should be high enough to skip most of it, and it's really just combinations of mechanics that we've already seen. The one thing that I do suggest paying very special attention to is that when she casts Thunder 2, there's going to be a Gnosis right after Discordant Damnation, so make sure to shortcast or get right in front of Daughter. The timing is pretty tight on this. So here you can see we've got a small slide, we just position to avoid the head, and then we go back to business as usual. It's going to cast a Thunder 3, so we just hug underneath and we'll be nice and safe. And she follows up with a Tank Buster. Here we did end up getting the lightning resistance down, so we do have to do a swap. And we have another slide. There were 3 tethers, so it's going to be a small slide. Position between the lines, dodge Sophia, and once she tilts it, we avoid the beam, and we avoid onrush. After a short delay, she'll start her attacks again. She hits us with 3 Sintamanis. And then another Arms of Wisdom. So here we refresh Gobskin, we hit Diamondback, and you can see our tank did not get the debuff, so we don't actually have to swap. Here there is a Thunder 2, so we get behind. And then we have our Discordant Damnation. So we actually messed this one up, and you can see 2 people don't get it, but it's not the end of the world. We just position so that we don't get knocked off. Most of us anyway. And at this point, we're starting to get close to sting range. So once we recover a bit, do some reses, heal up, stabilize, and so on, we'll start fishing for our Libras. Sophia's sting percentage is about 15%, so once you're at this point, and mechanics are resolved such that it's safe to do so, start fishing for a physical Libra, put up off guard, and then do your finishing combos. This fight can take a number of pulls for it to really click, but once people understand what's going on, or better yet, have a confident leader to call things out, it should proceed pretty smoothly. Overall, it is a very fun fight for blue. Good luck stinging! If you liked this video, feel free to check out these other ones. While you're at it, sting that subscribe button, share your bad breath in the comments, and stay tuned for more Blue Mage content.